what I said before. We have about 1 billion years on this planet before, because the sun, like every other star, gets brighter with time. It's just what they do. It's going to get hotter on the Earth, so even without us amplifying the CO2, we can speed the process up. But even if we don't, then in about 1 billion years, it's going to be way too hot here, so we're going to lose the surface oceans with all the models that we're running. And so we'd have to be either a spacefaring species at that point to go somewhere else, to build hopefully one of these amazing space stations that I keep seeing in the science fiction movies, and I really want to live on one of those. And you could think about a space station being Paris, one London, one New York, and shuttling in between, right? I have no problem. I don't need another planet if that's the case. But I think a lot of the time, because the Fermi paradox and the Drake equation were these amazing first attempts to quantify the problem. But I think it's also deeply rooted in our idea that we won't get our resources sorted out, that we will have to expand to survive, and that everyone does. And so I'm very much with Susan, hopefully, that if a 15 million year older civilization or the numbers are staggering. They could be 6 billion years older than we are. So older than us when the Earth was born, right? So it's not even something I can imagine. But I do hope, I'm I'm an optimist for humankind and civilization. I hope we get our energy and resources sorted, and then we wouldn't have to expand. We would go and find out because we're curious, we could travel, but we wouldn't have to colonize. And therefore, this whole idea that you would spread over the whole galaxy to actually make it yours might not appeal to us, because I think some of us in the audience, right, if you see a place where you'd love to live, but you see somebody else has built a house there, I'm not going to go and actually push it down and say, no, I'm here. And I hope as a species we evolve to that system too. And so we have our amazing planet and oasis in space. Maybe we don't need to occupy everything else. We're seated well here.
Just very brief. So I agree with a lot of that. I mean, I think the one thing is, though, and this is often an argument I use when people ask me, well, why do you study things like astrobiology and life in the universe? Because it's the way we're going to learn about ourselves. And I just wonder whether part of the motivation for spreading across the universe is you still looking for answers about yourself. And you may never be able to find all of those by staying at home. Just to put that out there.
Well, I would say, this whole conversation is really, really interesting to me. And as the not scientist person here, I, tend to simplify probably over or too much. But what you said about Earth being alive, what you said about us, do we or don't we want to go off? This whole idea of, I don't know, thinking about ourselves in a way that's a little bit different too. And that we can get there if we want to. And then, this about it coming back to us. There's two things that really struck me too from the flying in space thing and working in the space program is that I think everything we're doing in space, whether we're, low Earth orbit, we're thinking about going to Mars, we're out, further into the solar system, the galaxy, all of it, it ultimately comes back to improving life here on Earth. And part of that is understanding ourselves better. And I can tell you what, when you look at Earth from space, it looks alive. It doesn't look like this, lifeless place. It looks alive itself. You know that people are living there, that we are living there, that the creatures, all of the life that exists here is here. But the Earth itself looks alive. And I remember I grew up in Florida where, you have the thunderstorm over your head. And I just grew up thinking, oh, the rain's over, it's done, that was that random thunderstorm. You look at that from space, and it is tied to the other side of the planet. The lightning is striking and moving from one side of the planet to the other. There is not anything on this planet that's not interconnected. And it really it looked like the nervous system of Earth, like these little neurons firing across the planet. And so I like that idea of, as we're talking about what is life, and we can't really get that answer. I mean, this place could be, could be alive if we stretch the definition enough. And, because I'm going to get in trouble for not moderating properly, our part 3, and this will be I think all of this is a nice lead into it, an intelligent life. Here we go. So, if we accept that there is life out there, let's talk about whether or not that life might be intelligent, whatever that means. So what does that mean? Susan, I think this one, is intelligent life the same thing as conscious life?
So we talked about this yesterday in the artificial intelligence panel.
Yeah.
So if you want to hear more about it, you can watch the video of that one too. But I think that increasingly people are appreciating that there are all forms of intelligence, that we could appreciate, that we maybe don't even think about. Apparently the slime mold is, in a sense, intelligent because it can develop a navigational method even to solve the problem of the Tokyo subway system, like the shortest distance between 2 points. And plants even exhibit some amount of learning. And then there are all kinds of intriguing intelligences on Earth that are very unlike us, but quite smart. I don't actually think slime molds are all that smart, like the dolphin and the octopus. Well, I think on Earth, like in biological systems, we see a correlation between the highest and most intelligent beings. I mean, I don't like talking comparatively, but I will. The most intelligent beings on the planet, non-human animals, not slime molds, they tend to be conscious, right? I mean, as far as we could tell, non-human animals are conscious, and I won't say they are less conscious than us, because I think there's some ethics issues there, but there's a correlation between intelligence and consciousness in biological systems. When you get to a certain level of complexity, dogs, cats, and maybe lobsters, I don't know. I don't know. Who knows? Maybe they feel pain, right? Apparently they passed a law about that, and when they have to be anesthetized before they're boiled. But anyway, there seems to be a correlation with biological systems. But that doesn't mean that it's the case when we develop artificial intelligence. When we have AIs, they could outthink us, but there's no reason right now to suspect that they will be conscious, that it will feel like anything from the inside to be them. So I think that's quite intriguing right now. So depending upon whether AI is life, intelligent life, if AI may not be a case of consciousness, that's interesting.
I think there's a lot of different questions associated with this whole idea of intelligence. Is intelligence, I mean, could you look at almost like a microscopic creature that can just survive? I mean, is the ability to survive, associated with intelligence? I mean, that kind of thing has always intrigued me too. Caleb, I think, and this to me goes back to kind of the consultation that you did for One Strange Rock as well, is what do we know about how intelligent life evolved here? When we start thinking about intelligence, which might, stem from the question before, is, that whole idea of what we know about it here. How are we here in this room even communicating?
Oh gosh! Wow.
Oh boy.
In the 2-minute version.
Do we have
I know
another
it is. It's a really, but I think this is kind of the root of how we, to me, we're talking about life in other places, and I think we come back to, as human beings, relating it to ourselves from an intelligence standpoint, from maybe how we look standpoint, from how we breathe, those kinds of things. But there's
gosh.
I know, no pressure.
Well, okay, so very quickly, I think two things spring to my mind. First is, there's the question of human intelligence and human origins, which is still hotly debated and we don't fully understand. What I do find intriguing is that it seems increasingly clear that there were other hominin species around, like the Neanderthal, like Homo erectus, that were making tools, potentially making art. There was work done recently suggesting that Neanderthals were actually seafaring in the Mediterranean, 60,000 years ago. And so we may actually live at an unusual time for intelligence on the planet, in as much as we are the only intelligence walking around that doesn't have something else of equivalent intelligence. I mean, an octopus is super smart, but it's different. It's fundamentally different than us. So that may skew our perspective on the nature of intelligence a little bit. The other thing that sprung to mind is, and it was actually the slime mold that made me think about this, is it's awfully difficult to analyze intelligence as an intelligent creature, because we see intelligence in things where there may not actually be any. So one example is the ant colony algorithm. Right? So, you know, you have a colony of ants, you plop some food down, and it's in some complicated landscape. And what you'll see happen very rapidly is the ants are sort of spreading out from their colony, is they'll pretty quickly form a chain back and forth to the food, and all the ants, or most of the ants, follow that chain, and it looks really intelligent, because it may go around the little hills or up and down and through the vegetation. How do they do that? They must be intelligent. But it turns out that actually it isn't intelligent at all, or at least it doesn't seem that way. It is that each ant leaves a little trail of chemicals behind it, a little pheromone trail. And the first one that finds the pile of food comes back to the nest, and it follows its own trail. And then the next ant senses that trail and follows that trail. And the food pile, and the quickest path to the food pile, is the one that gets reinforced the most rapidly. And so over a very short period of time, the shortest path to the food is found, is discovered by the ant colony. But is there any intelligence involved in that? I don't think one would necessarily claim it is. So I'm kind of being sneaky about not directly answering you, that it's super, super challenging to think about intelligence for all these different reasons. I suspect these guys have more to say.
Because I think the thing that's interesting about ants is that individually they're not intelligent, but collectively they are.
Yes, exactly.
And so I think there's always this problem with intelligence when you're talking about it, is that we want to assign it as a property of individuals. And it gets back to this idea that we always want to draw a boundary around living things and put it in a box. And it's not really like life can be put in a box. Life is a collective property of many interacting systems, and so is intelligence. And so when we're talking about properties of intelligence, we need to think more collectively about what we're talking about. So even here being at the World Science Festival, we're all talking about science and the beauty of science. And science is obviously something that intelligent systems should be capable of doing, but we don't really do science as individuals, we do it as societies. So I think there's an interesting question about thinking about looking for intelligent life related to thinking about what we mean by intelligence in that kind of sense. And so the example that I usually like to give about like thinking about information related to intelligence and like what I mean by information in particular, because I've used this word a lot, and it's one of these words that just like life is really hard to define, is that, thank you. Sorry, I guess my mic's not working. Oh, I feel really cool now. I'm jazzy with a real mic. Yeah, fancy. Is that, so this word gets thrown around a lot, and I think a lot of people have different definitions for it, but I think one of the things that's very interesting about us as an intelligent civilization is that we construct theories of our world, and we can, like laws, and we can use those to do really interesting things like launch satellites into space or people into space. And so theories themselves are actually information about the world, and they're information that allows us to do things. And so that's one way that I actually define intelligence, is when you start having things that those systems actually have knowledge or information that allows them to generate structures that wouldn't be possible without having knowledge. There's no possibility that you would have all those satellites orbiting our planet unless we had a technological civilization with intelligence and knowledge about the laws of physics. So when we're thinking about looking for intelligent life out there, I think what we need to look for is things that can't be explained by physics and chemistry alone, but require additional information in the system to actually generate those structures. Now, as I'm saying that, I have no idea what the heck that means, but I think that we need to think about that kind of perspective in order to really clarify the questions that we're asking.
I think Sarah touches on something that when we go back to the Drake equation, you saw that the last part of this, or one of the last parts of it is like a civilization that communicates, or that sends signal out that can be detected and interpreted, because they are really, or the Drake equation is really made for communicating civilizations. And a flop way to put it is like we are kind of looking for electrical engineers that built radio telescopes. What is one path of the evolution that you can go through? And now also SETI is expanding to look for optical lights and other things. As we are developing as a species, we're trying to see other technology features we could look for. However, in this whole effect, I think the N, or how many civilizations are out there that communicate in the Drake equation, is completely different from how many planets with life are out there. And also